What's going on? Welcome into Empty the Notebook. Another week and fresh off a bye week. We have back our co-host here, Aditi Kinkhabwala. I'm Evan Washburn. The show that takes you onto the sidelines, into the production meetings, all the stories you need to know about our games, and we'll also cover the league. And Aditi, first of all, happy birthday. A big day here for the show. We want to wish you a happy birthday. And we had to deal with some conditions for the first time in terms of cold weather across the East Coast. You were in New England. I was in Cincinnati. How did you survive on the eve of what is a big day in our world?
Well, first, thank you. Thank you for noting the day that I share with Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Britney Spears. I won't say who amongst the four of us is the oldest, but some of us are wearing our birthdays a little bit better, I hope. As for the weather, that wasn't so good for my aging skin. I'll tell you that. It was a bit windy. It was cold, but there was no precipitation and the sun did shine for a good part of the day. I was actually very interested to see how the Colts handled the cold since it would be their first cold weather game. I was interested to see how Anthony Richardson would do, but of course, Anthony Richardson threw for 400 yards when he played in a 30-degree game against Vanderbilt. So he was fine. We'll get to that later. How about you? Did you get any precipitation?
No precipitation, but it was cold. And I have this feeling that your first cold game of the season is often the hardest because you haven't been hardened, if you will. You don't have that callousing of cold weather. So we made it through,
and you
it
don't
was an
know,
exciting
I'll
game.
interrupt
So
you,
we'll
you
get into
don't
both
know
of
the
our
preparation.
games and sort of the
You don't
big
know the
picture view of
preparation
it, some of our takeaways, and then obviously we'll empty the notebook later in the show and then maybe throw some flags on some hot topics around the league. But in Cincinnati, Aditi, we had what was a very un-AFC North game where it was 82 combined points. It was the highest scoring game in the NFL this season. And Russell Wilson, in my opinion, was once again the story. Threw for 414 yards, 3 touchdowns, the most productive game for him, second most productive of his career in terms of passing yards, most productive as a Steeler. And it brings to light something we didn't really get into as much over the course of our broadcast, but what is continuing to be a discussion point. What does this mean moving forward? Because the Steelers are a playoff team. Russell Wilson has been a big part of that. He's not the only reason, but he would seem to be the perfect fit. And as we talked about before we started rolling, I've had a lot of Steelers the last few weeks. This is the most
Sure. Evan, I think that what you're saying is the fascinating piece of this is that we talked about Arthur Smith last week. We've talked about Arthur Smith repeatedly, this brilliant offensive coordinator hire that Mike Tomlin has made. And considering what Russell Wilson's last 3 years have been, the end of his tenure in Seattle and then the 2 years in Denver, it really bears noting what Arthur Smith is doing to get so much out of Russell Wilson and have him playing at this unbelievably high level. Also, if Arthur Smith is not leaving for that UNC job, then maybe, as you're saying, that's a marriage that continues really well. But you know what? I'm going to jump to my game and the same idea of second chances for quarterbacks. So in Russell Wilson's case, maybe it's a third chance. But for Anthony Richardson, it's been a bit of a second chance. The Colts made a move that was sort of looked at a little awry when they decided to sit Anthony Richardson a few weeks ago. Now, remember, Shane Steichen has been unbelievably bullish on the idea that the only way a young and raw quarterback gets better is by playing. And we know that Anthony Richardson came into the league as raw as it comes. He did not have a lot of college tape at all. And then, of course, last year he got hurt. He didn't get to play a lot, Evan. And Steichen has said, he's going to play. He's going to play. The only way he gets better is to play. And then all of a sudden, he gets benched for your friend and mine, Joe Flacco. Now, Flacco goes out there for 2 games. The offense doesn't quite get the spark that it was hoping to, and Anthony Richardson gets that starting spot back. But let me tell you what happened when he sat. He started coming into the building earlier. He started staying later. He watched more film and he asked more questions of his coaches. And this speaks to the fact that Anthony Richardson had never properly been taught how to be a quarterback at this level. Look, he never had to be. When he was in high school and in that small sample size in college, Evan, he was a better athlete than anybody on the field. He didn't necessarily have to put in that work. He didn't necessarily grow up going to these fancy passing academies where they teach you, hey, this is how quarterbacks prepare. This is the process. And I'll say, Anthony Richardson was so honest with us that benching was a wake-up call that, hey, this is about the process. This is about the preparation. Sometimes something needs to be taken away from you for you to get it. And now, granted, it's only been 3 weeks since he's been back, but he's played way better. He's played looser. He's been more accurate. And that preparation continues. I think Anthony Richardson's star is absolutely on the rise. Shane Steichen and the Colts made what they knew would be an unpopular decision, but a decision that was really for the best for that young quarterback. And I'll tell you, yesterday's game, the only thing that looked easy, Evan, was that 2-point conversion. In case you missed it, they were down 19-play drive to pull within one. Steichen decided to go for the win, and Anthony Richardson runs in for the 2 points.
Yeah, his response has been incredible, and all the gifts and talents are there. Now it's about how he harnesses it. And before I lost you, Aditi, we're getting into just what's going on in Pittsburgh and with Russell Wilson.
Right.
And just quickly to wrap it, the thing that has me most interested is what does it mean moving forward? And what I've seen from Russell Wilson the last few weeks, just meeting with him and doing these games. And as you know, and as people come to understand what it is we do, the more you have a team, the more you get to understand some of the nuances, some of the depth that's going on behind the scenes. And having not spent a ton of time with Russell Wilson in Seattle, some time in Denver, this to me appears to be as comfortable as he's been even off the field with the type of leadership they have in Pittsburgh, and not just Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith, but the leaders on the team in TJ Watt and Cam Hayward. And his word to us was he's in love with what's happening right now, but there's clearly a feeling of, man, this is something I would love to be a part of. Now, money will probably talk more than anything in the offseason, but Russell Wilson, to me, would seem to be the perfect fit for a team that has been looking and searching for an answer post Ben Roethlisberger. So interesting storyline as we have Guy on the other end of his career, just turned 36, and you have a young quarterback who has all the talent necessary to be a star, and how that will kind of manifest itself over the course of this season as they're still in the playoff hunt and then moving forward. But coming up next, we'll really crack open the notebook and dive into some stories we didn't get to during Sunday's broadcast. Welcome back into Empty the Notebook, and this is the real core of what this show was about, is about, and that's telling you stories that we couldn't get in over the course of a 3-hour broadcast. Because Aditi, as you know, and as people come to understand again what it is we do, we follow the game. We can do all the research, all the prep, all these great meetings, and sometimes the game just doesn't dictate a story or a note or a piece of information making it onto the show. But that's why we have this show, Empty the Notebook. So go ahead, give us something that maybe wasn't a big part of your broadcast yesterday in New England that you feel like folks need to know about what's going on with Drake Maye.
You know what? Let's stick with quarterback development, Evan. For me, I also, on the other side of the ball, had Drake Maye. So yesterday I had the two youngest quarterbacks in the National Football League. Drake Maye, of course, was the number 3 overall pick of the New England Patriots. And Gerard Mayo put it this way. He said, no one is more responsible for Drake Maye's development than Alex Van Pelt. So let's go backwards a little bit. Drake Maye is playing behind a patchwork offensive line. And with all due respect to those gentlemen, I don't know that there's a starter on another NFL team in that whole bunch. He's playing with an unbelievably inconsistent run game, and his wide receivers, I don't know how many of them are even wide receiver 3s on other teams. Despite that, Drake Maye is getting better and better every week. Now, he on his own is obviously a brilliant young man, Evan. He can get through a 4th progression, which you often don't see in even 2nd or 3rd year quarterbacks. So kudos to him. His work ethic is tremendous. He has been raised to be a leader. That is who he is. But Alex Van Pelt is a guy who played quarterback in the league up in Buffalo. He was an understudy to Jim Kelly for a decade. He has mentored Aaron Rodgers, Andy Dalton. He fixed Baker Mayfield's footwork. He's worked with quarterbacks galore. And right now, what you see him doing with Drake Maye, he's taught him how to hand off the ball, how to hide a handoff, how to do the run, pass, play action as well as anybody else, how to manage a huddle, how to get through those progressions, how to keep his footwork solid. And it really is an open dialogue. And as you keep saying, we get to stand behind the bench. We watch interactions. So now I've gotten to see Drake Maye over the course of a season, and he'll tell us, they're putting more on my table each week. They're trusting me more each week. Alex Van Pelt will tell us, okay, he's asking more questions each week. But you actually get to see it, Evan, right? Like when you watch the quarterback and his coach dialogue on the bench, the way that they come off after a drive, the way that they look to each other, and whether it's just a coach talking at a player or a player talking to a coach and the conversation happening, it's really, really a fun thing to see. And it's especially exciting because, again, Alex Van Pelt is not a guy that's necessarily getting all this attention. And it's hard to do that when you have a team like the Patriots who, again, played their hearts out yesterday, but ran into a buzzsaw there at the end.
No, all the reviews from people like yourself and those that cover that team on a daily basis really feel like the Patriots do have something in Drake Maye, and I agree. Alex Van Pelt, extremely underrated in terms of a coach and an ability to develop talent. So going back to this Pittsburgh-Cincinnati game, and this is a great example of how this all breaks down. So Joey Porter Jr., incredible young talent at corner, had a tough day, got a little handsy, had 6 called penalties, and that's been an unfortunate trend for him over the course of the season. But we have this great meeting with him the night before the game. This is going to be a game where he's either going to match up with Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. We learned that he's going to follow Higgins throughout the game. But then it goes into, all right, so what's the origin of playing corner? Obviously, his dad was a famous all-pro outside linebacker, pass rusher, and Joey Porter. And he said he was at an Ohio State camp. He was in the wide receiver drills, and a DB coach came and grabbed him and was like, hey, kid, you're not a wide receiver. You're a DB. So we were able to get that in over the course of the broadcast yesterday. But my favorite part of his origin story, if you will, going back to those high school recruiting days, was he was down to 3 schools, and it was Penn State, Ohio State, and LSU. Obviously, he was a top 300 recruit. You know this, Aditi, really well. But Penn State was kind of lukewarm, as he described it. They weren't feeling him as much as maybe Ohio State and LSU were, and he kind of wanted to go to Penn State. And the way he tells it, and you may have even been at this training camp, who knows, because I know you were covering the team pretty day-to-day at that point. Training camp in Latrobe, so this would have been probably 2018. He said after practice, Penn State coaches were there for whatever reason, and he and Antonio Brown did some one-on-ones after practice. And again, to hear him tell it, I don't want to say he locked up AB, but he held his own against Antonio Brown. And after that training camp practice, that was enough for the Penn State coaches to give the stamp of, hey, man, we're going to offer you. And a few weeks later, I think early September, he committed to Penn State, and the rest is history. And full circle, as has been the story with Joey Porter Jr., he's back in Pittsburgh playing for the coach who coached with his dad and for his dad. And he's become a young star there. So I just thought that was an incredible sort of background and story. And it's one of those things when you hear it, you're like, oh, I hope we get this in the broadcast. We didn't, but we got it on here.
And you know what, Evan, this is such a window into why Mike Tomlin loves legacies. He loves brothers. He loves football families. He loves football sons. And it's because those are the experiences. Joey Porter Jr. grew up being in the Steelers locker room, being exposed to guys like Antonio Brown. Those are things that you just can't take for granted. And as you know, Mike Tomlin loves players whose fathers or brothers played in the NFL.
A quick question for you before we hit break, because you probably would know this as well as anyone. When that happened, do you think AB understands, hey, if I don't go 100, maybe make this kid look good? Or is it just not in AB's DNA to not try and beat somebody who's in front of him playing corner? Because that was the question we had. We didn't get it from Joey, but did AB have some work in there to help him look good for the Penn State coaches?
That's not AB at all. I have seen AB pull up in a race if he knew that he wasn't going to win. He does not like losing at anything. But you are hitting on a different window into AB's personality, that everything that has happened in the last 5 years, we've sort of lost sight of who the player
Sure.
that he was before then. Evan, he always had time for young players. I'll never forget when Artie Burns, the first round cornerback draft pick of the Steelers, the time that Antonio Brown would spend with him after practice. If I do this, you need to do that. If my body moves this way, then you have to respond like that. He used to have inordinate amounts of time for young players.
Yeah, it's a reminder of, you never know when the moment for you is going to be to impress that coach that you need to impress. And Joey Porter did it against one of the better receivers in Steelers history. Coming up next, it's time to throw some flags, Aditi. Get it out of your pocket, because there's going to be penalties over the course of the next 10 minutes here. Stay with us. Welcome back into Empty the Notebook. Evan Washburn alongside Aditi Kinkhabwala. We do it every week, Aditi. We throw in some flags. We'll present kind of back and forth some statements about hot topics around the league. And if you throw the flag, obviously it's a penalty. You disagree, maybe give your explanation. So what do you got for me out of the gate?
All right, well, let's start with this one. The Ravens need a new kicker.
Ooh, man. Who would have thought we would ever be having this discussion? I'm throwing the flag. Look, I am willing to admit that it is ugly in terms of what's happening with Justin Tucker here in Baltimore. I feel for him. Obviously, we all have gotten to know Justin. There's the player. He's an incredible kicker, arguably the best of all time when he's at his best, and he's a good dude. So there's that part of it as well. There's the reality of this league, that it's a production-based league. So I get that. I get the question as to, hey, is there a move that needs to be made? The reason I'm throwing the flag, Aditi, I don't understand what that move would be. Justin Tucker, and for Ravens fans and really Ravens players, and I feel like they lent voice to this, it may have been Marlon Humphrey, they're now experiencing what I would say 28, 29 other teams in the league deal with pretty much year in and year out. Inconsistency at the kicker position, especially when you creep past the 50-yard line. I know he's missed some extra points. He missed one yesterday. But I'll again quote John Harbaugh too. If you're asking, are we going to get a new kicker, moving on from Justin, I'm not planning on doing that. I don't think that would be wise. And I would say I agree, because I don't know the alternative. You told me you were going to be able to bring in a capable kicker from 45 to 55 that has a better percentage. Go ahead and do it. I would say what has to happen is they have to recalibrate their decision-making in terms of situational football and when to go for it on fourth down, depending on where they are on the field, and not think of it as old Justin Tucker, where it's, hey, trot him out there because that's an easy three.
You know, Evan, it's crazy because for so long, Justin Tucker has been Mr. Automatic. And yesterday, he left 7 points on the table, 2 missed field goals and that missed extra point. The Ravens win that game with those 7 points. With 6 of those points, they win that game. So it is dicey, but it really drives home having a guy like Chris Boswell means.
Totally. Absolutely. All right. Here for you. This was obviously a big story yesterday concerning visual and just kind of an ugly scene. Aziz Al-Shaair needs further punishment, reportedly, after that hit on Trevor Lawrence. There is some punishment, maybe a suspension coming down the line. So present to you the idea that, one, a suspension is the right move, and that punishment needs to happen after a play that left Trevor Lawrence in an ugly spot and obviously out for that game.
In the fencing position. And you know what? No flag here. I agree. I've been told that there will be further suspension coming. And I think that that's right. Look, Aziz Al-Shaair apologized this morning. He explained that the play happened very quickly and that he never had any malicious intent. D'Amico Ryan spoke out for his player and said, look, that's not who we are. But by the same token, this was ugly. This was unnecessary. This was ugly. Clearly seeing Trevor Lawrence in that fencing position after he had just gotten healthy again, there's no place in this game for that sort of violence. And so I don't have a problem with the further suspension.
Yeah, I would agree. It was an unfortunate situation. I do often, though, sympathize with defenders in those situations where
Sure.
it is happening at hyper speed. You know this now, making your living on the sideline, just how quickly things happen. So, just what you really hope for is Trevor Lawrence continuing to be okay, recovering, and Al-Shaair being able to figure out ways to avoid this moving forward. Okay, what's up next, Aditi?
Okay, well, we talked about the Ravens and that close game. Well, the Eagles, after all of that hubbub earlier in the season about Nick Sirianni, look at how the Eagles are playing. And so I say this, the biggest challenger to the Detroit Lions in the NFC is the Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh my God, my arm wants to come up for this flag, but I'm not going to do it. I'm in. I'm buying in on the Nick Sirianni train, and it really isn't as much about what he's doing or has done, even though he's leading this group, and I think deserves a lot of credit for what happened at the bye week and getting on the same page with Jalen Hurts. But this is the Saquon Barkley show. This team has proven to be everything that Detroit is, and I think they're healthier. Now, it's still early. There's still time. But as we know, Aditi, it's all about kind of peaking at the right time and being healthy at the right time. And right now, the Philadelphia Eagles look every bit of that. So you give me your last thought on this, because we got to get out of here.
You know what? This is where we notice situational football and what decisions are made in situational football and where the coaches are. But I'll tell you, I on a personal level, I am so jacked for the Detroit Lions. I was there 2 years ago when Sheila Ford-Hamp had to give Dan Campbell a public vote of confidence when he was telling me the only way a young team learns how to win close games is by winning a close game. They finally did the following week, and look at where they've been. That Bills-Lions game, Evan, don't you kind of wish we got to be on that one?
Yeah, that would be nice. But Tracy will take care of it for us, and they'll have a great show. And it's going to be fun to see this Eagles Lions train, maybe trains, I should say, collide at some point. That's a show. That was fun. Great to have you back. Again, happy birthday, everybody. Thanks, shout out to Aditi. And if you missed this episode or any episode, maybe joined us a little bit late, you can catch them in full on the NFL on CBS YouTube channel. And we'll see you from a sideline next Sunday. Thanks for watching.